I foresee a time coming when it will be normal for people to seek out ways to become aware of their patriarchal patterning, specifically in what limits intimacy, where men will actively seek out guides to assist them in their self-inquiry. And going on past examples of mine, I do tend to be at least 15 years or more ahead of what the collective conversations typically are, which means I tend to see into future realities that are not yet manifest. And then that predicts future trends. And when the Tigress Path first began in the early 2000s, men were questioning me, directly trying to challenge me, accusing me of being sexist for offering a female body-based embodiment process, because not only did they not understand that yoga was passed down through male lineages and was not something women were part of, and nor was it designed for the female form, and that women in the were practicing the same like men, rather than having a specialized female approach that I brought in with Tigress. So aside from that, these men accusing me of being sexist, the concept for female embodiment as an entire niche really did not yet exist. So they could only compare what they were seeing to what they already knew, which was more of a model of division instead of evolution. And back at that time, even some women questioned me on what I was doing with Tigress, as though a female sexual practice would have to mean that it's about manipulation or power over men or something like that, and not getting that it's something for her own health and well-being and female spiritual path, because it literally was not something that was happening at all back at that time. And so I feel it's the same with this in the Beyond Patriarchal Sex inquiry, where people might assume and assign negative meaning initially until they realize that it's something really beneficial for everyone. And if that continues to play out in a similar way to what has been the process with the Tigress Path, it that changed when men could no longer hold on to that negative impression that they once held, because they were seeing what Tigress was actually doing in the women that were practicing it, and how it made them more open, more receptive, more rested in their feminine nature, more interested in embodied polarity in relationship, more available for sex, more honoring of men. These are some of the side effects. And some of those men that initially responded in a negative way became my biggest fans and were actively recommending and advocating for women to go to Tigress to see what would happen for them. And that was all when the teaching that I was doing for many years was all in person in one main local area. So it was really easy to track those changes and those changes in specific people at that time. But now I'm also seeing a similar thing play out with the women who were in the pilot version of the Living Beyond Patriarchal Sex course, which has recently just come to a completion. And because some like to assume that this Beyond Patriarchal Sex project is more in a woman's favor than a man's favor. And yet, the changes in the women that have just been in this course are so obvious that the men in their lives, who they are relating to, have shifted also. And that's without those men ever speaking to me, or sometimes they don't even know that the woman they're with or around is even doing the course. And yet those men have changed. They have shifted because of the women in the course who are getting initiation in the deep women's space together. So today, as I mentioned in the last episode, I'm sharing some real examples of what happened in that pilot group and in those women's own words, which they've given me permission to share anonymously. So you won't hear their names, but you might recognize patterns and experiences that you can relate to also. Welcome to this provocative and heartfelt podcast where patriarchy is defined as a paradigm that both men and women uphold in different ways. Here you get to listen in on genuine conversations between leaders from around the world to discover more mutual respect and less division, as well as more pleasure and love in your life. My name is Dévashi Shakti, and you are warmly welcome to be part of these Beyond Patriarchal Sex conversations. Okay, so inside the Living Beyond Patriarchal Sex course, I was really glad to see a variety of contrasting starting places inside the immersion with the women. And this is what made it not the same journey for each one, because her results depend on her most aligned outcome for her intimacy situation that she's in. And I want to thank each of those women in advance who journeyed with me in this, and to let you know as a listener that these are just a few of the snippets of a huge amount of expression and learning and sharing that happened over a 6-month time frame. Okay, so one of the women, she is in a new and interesting place, having not been out of monogamous relationships very often at all for all of her life. And now she's exploring her boundaries, and she's getting very clear responses from her instinct somatically that she's been learning about from the course. And that's helping her to build confidence to know what patterns she's walking into when meeting men now in present time, and making sure that she doesn't end up in the same position as last time, because one of her last times became very volatile and actually violent. So it's essential that she doesn't repeat the past for her own safety and well-being. And so she's getting to know her nuanced somatic boundaries in ways that she hadn't given herself permission to do so before, and probably wasn't as aware of how to do that. And so fantastic to witness her confidence to voice with men what she's really actually feeling and experiencing, how that's being received so well by those men who are listening to her, making her feel really joyful and like a conscious co-creator of connection, of relationships. So that gives her a lot more resources to work with for when it's time for her to be in her next relationship. So I was more reporting back from her experience there, but coming up, I'm going to give some exact quotes of other experiences as well. So a different woman in the course, she is with a man, married, I believe, and he's become so accustomed to her mothering and over accommodation of him emotionally, so much so that it's left very little space for her to really be a woman with him. And I want to take the time to explain this because I think this is a very common scenario. So what happens is that she withholds her true response, and then she, in the moment, and then she tries to bring it up later, more from her head, narrating about it intellectually, rather than sharing from her honest, vulnerable feelings in the moment when it's alive, which I know that many women listening will be able to relate to. Because when in this pattern, women think that they're being kind and mature and reflective or commit, but when it's happening to the extent that she's silencing herself and then feeling resentful towards him that there's not enough space for her real experience in the relationship, this is an emotional loop that just keeps looping, and there's stuck in this. And oftentimes they're blaming both themselves and the man for this predicament. But actually, she is the one with the power to change the situation. But that change doesn't get to happen without some level of disturbance to the status quo. But that doesn't mean that she's got to go banshee mode on him. But there is a learning how to presence her own experience in her body in particular and trust him enough to be real in the moment, to not shield him from the consequences of his own actions. It's a really common one, as I've said. It comes up for so many women that I've worked with over the years, including myself and the uninitiated men that they're with. And this is why women need initiation process amongst other women to express and learn how to really do that from her body in particular, from her coherent energy, because this is how we as women guide in intimacy, in relationship from the inner realms. And it's happening through the wisdom of our bodies when we aren't judging it. And so then you're not just in a position as a woman to have to tell him later from your mind about what's wrong or, what you want. We can stay in a more proactive, co-creative role of the energy that we do want. And this can make a man not used to being with the real version of a woman because she is having a hard time being honest with herself, and therefore the ability to be truthful with him, to invite him into a different dimensional space emotionally. And of course, there is also the counterpart to their patterns, but my attention is on what we can proactively be doing and experiencing as women so that we aren't in a disempowered position. There's actually such a range of experiences to report and to share from this immersion. And one of the women, and here are her direct words, she's the type of woman who's been in the pattern of feeling repulsed by men and having, been through a lot of negative experiences. And she is married, and um, she said things like how she expressed how much fear that she has of men and how much she doesn't like them, and how she feels a lot of negative emotions and hurt, and that she struggles to see her husband for all the things that he is because she keeps seeing him through the lens of her pain, basically. And, when exploring how to really embody her own capacity for pleasure, for her own well-being, the initial responses were more things like, but if I'm in my pleasure, a man can take that from me. And so any woman hearing this, if you have been able to relate to this in the past, or you do relate to this now, it's so important to know that this is not a forever position that you need to be in. I mean, it could be, a lot of women do actually live their whole lives until the end in this way, but it's not necessary that we do that. But we do need the safety. And for these words to come out, knowing that they are not going to be judged, knowing that it's welcome to say the real experience, women need that kind of space. And there are, of course, moments in life when instinctively we need to contract and close our energy field down to not attract attention, like walking through, a certain environment or situation where it's wisdom to do that. But to live from a state of like chronic closure, it's really draining. It's actually so exhausting for a woman's nervous system. So for any woman to feel like she's so over men that she doesn't want to share her essence with anyone, she typically can end up closing down even from herself. And that can lead to all kinds of physical and mental health issues because her energy is contracted and suppressed and stagnated instead of flowing. And that's a lot of power stagnated. And instead, what can be happening is the restore of her coherency field and a building of strength in her own autonomous space. That means that, when it's a relatively safe environment or situation, she can just be relaxing open for her own well-being, not for the purpose of attracting attention, not for the purpose of having a man feel her essence necessarily. There are phases to female restoration, and the Tigress really does go very deeply into that. And so bringing this to this woman's relationship, she felt confronted introducing some intentional or conscious approaches to intimacy with her partner after so many years of being together in the same way that she had enough of and did not want anymore, like very clear patriarchal sex dynamics. And to explore conscious connection or touch in a safe place without arousal and without judgments to build that confidence, women really need that space with each other, because even when it's just intentional eye contact with her partner after so many years of there being so much density in their experience of intimacy, that can feel like a lot. It can feel like a lot for her nervous system and for his to be able to rise into that presence. But that is what it takes. And while the immersion is not at all actually just teaching like techniques that you can learn in many other places, it does bring some of that, some really powerful and effective ways of that. But the majority of the course is actually going deeper into the whole unraveling of the patriarchal spell itself, which is a pretty unique content, actually. And so, what this woman did is she decided to do an experiment that she wasn't going to ask anything of herself, but to keep showing up and meeting herself with Tigress, as we say in the practice, to see what then opens up. And that being very different to her usual momentum, which was trying to change herself, trying to change her patterns, change her behaviors, and instead letting her results happen through this experimental approach where she could take the pressure off everything else, simply commit to herself, and show up to meet herself in her body with Tigress and just see what would happen. And by the way, when she said this, she really hoped that I wouldn't be offended in her saying that as an experiment. But that's not at all offensive to me, because I realize that someone that's new to this, why should they have faith in it yet when they haven't had their own experience in their body yet? But for me, I loved this approach for her. I thought it was very authentic. And I've seen the results for women over and over and over again. So I have no doubt how effective it can be. But I loved how she gave herself the permission to find out for herself. And in her own words, this is what she said. She wanted a dedicated space for her internal world that, and she had the question, does anything else even matter if she's not attending to that, to her internal world? And how would things change for her without coming from her mind to try and change herself? When it's coming from her embodied energy, what would that result be? So the Tigress month pass, which a lot of the women in the Living Beyond Patriarchal Sex course were doing together at the same time. The month pass in Tigress is where women go deep in the practices at home by themselves, but also together, because it's a vortex, it's an online vortex where it isn't just about doing the classes when you can, it's about what the result of that opens up in your daily life, so that the women come on and share about that straight after the practice or later in the week or whatever it may be. So coming back to this particular woman who was new to working with me altogether, by the way, she said, or we all saw rather, that she kept showing up in such an unapologetic presence. You got to understand, like someone who was maybe quite held back from sharing much at all at first, literally came into her videos choosing to share from such a powerful, real state so orientated to her own inner experience that it was really clear to me that everyone in her daily life would have also been noticing the changes in her as well. Because when a woman is interested and curious about her inner world in that way, it automatically shifts her presence. It automatically starts restructuring her energy field. And this takes her out of that disempowered over accommodation, stacking up the resentment kind of patterning into an expression that is just flowing and owning her experience and honoring herself. And the more space she makes for her, the more she can give for everyone else that matters around her as well. And basically her words were, okay, primal divine frequency, which we talk about in Tigress, show me what you've got. That was her energy, that was her attitude. She was saying, I'm giving you my time, my attention, my energy. What have you got for me? Because living in any other way is simply not working, and it's never really been working. And it's really huge when a woman comes to this place because it does imply a loss of a former identity. There is a death when we open to a new way of being. And this way of seeing herself meant that she had to let it fall away, the more contracted version of herself, because her authentic expression, the spaciousness that she was giving herself, commanded presence. And it was and is so wonderful to see that in her. Her eyes glow, her skin is more radiant, like her energy is palpably changed. And what I love to say to the women as a reminder is that this is something that no one and no thing outside of you can give to you. It's not just something that can happen from an idea in your head. It's only a living reality in your body. And because we all know that life can be challenging in the ways that it can be, but if you have that happening inside of you, if you have this deep inner connection, then no matter what is going on outside, you are still more than okay. You don't collapse, you don't get exhausted and depleted in the same ways as before. And so while that particular woman is in her process of continuing to unravel from the patriarchal sex patterns in her relationship, she is definitely well on her way. And she has some very practical steps that she knows that she can take. And the more she gets comfortable with herself, with the women in the tigress space, the more easy it is and is going to keep feeling for her to bring that level of herself to her partner. And for some people that maybe haven't really lived from that identity of their soul, or the fact that they are, a spiritual being having a human experience, to be witnessed meditating, or to be witnessed in their sacred space, in their real full presence, is something incredibly intimate, actually. And this can be very confronting for a couple that has not related with each other in that way at all, or not for many, many years, because of all of the challenges that go on in life and having children and all the different things that go on. And this part of life gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And so what we need to do is give more and more space for that. And I can say that for me as a woman, I needed in the beginning, quite some time ago now, I needed to be only in women's spaces for me to develop my own energy into where it is today. Because if I had have tried to just bring all of that and put so much pressure on myself to have to get everything right away and bring that to a man, to a relationship, that wasn't something that was going to be possible for me. I needed to do a lot of healing and growth and trauma recovery and building of my confidence and my somatic boundaries and all of those things in the women's only space in order for me to have ease with that when a man is in front of me. And so I personally understand that process that it takes for women to come to all of that. And I'm so happy that that woman was in the course and that she's continuing with the Tigress Path. And I want to tell you about a different woman right now. This message is for the ladies. If you want to fully get in touch with yourself and your body, enter the Tigress Path. Here you become an initiated woman living way beyond patriarchal sex, and also become a safe space for men to learn about patriarchy without the blame. Inside the Tigress Path, we have personal transformation and also professional accredited training options. The links to connect are below with this episode. This is a relationship that where they don't have children, but they've already been together for more than 10 years. And she was noticing how there was a renegotiating of how her partner regulates his nervous system through her body. There's a level where, even in a healthy, conscious situation, both people do that with each other. But when it's out of balance and happening in the patriarchal frame, is when a woman's body is expected to provide that sexually without energy really being returned to her from that. So it's going one way, which is very depleting, very, very exhausting for a woman over time to be in that configuration. So noticing that there was more awareness that he was naturally bringing to the energy that he would approach her body with. And this is one of the things that she was noticing over the months together. And these are her exact words. She says, I just realized how powerful I actually am. And everything has clicked for me and all I've been learning from you over the years. I noticed a quiet, calm confidence and relaxed presence, like everything feels easier. My relationship with men has shifted. It's like they are listening to me, like they want to listen to me. There's a shift that she can hardly explain, she says, but it just feels really, really different. And because of the changes in me, these are her words, it has changed my partner immensely. And that's a really great thing to witness, that my transformation is bringing up a lot in him. And when she went on to describe more about that, this bringing up a lot for him is not always easy to navigate, but it is necessary. And she goes on to say more in her partner's words. These are the things that he said to her personally. I don't know what you're doing, but your body is changing me. These are such profound reflections. And she described how he was a little confused because he's used to being very intellectual, but now he's so present in his heart. Not that he wasn't heart connected before, but there's an extra level of presence and expression from his heart where he's feeling what it's like to truly, truly be in his body and making time to be with that, with himself in his own way, which hasn't happened for many years. She's described how he's more attentive and playful and funny. And in these stretch of months, less than 6 months actually, he came out with these incredible words. And these are not just great results. This is something that I put in the category of quite miraculous, actually, because this couple, again, more than 10 years, and with all of her exploration of breaking the spell of patriarchal sex in her patterning, in her body, and coming to her partner in a different way, what he says is that my love for you is so much, my heart, I just love you so much. And he's crying when he says this. And he says he wants to take things to the next level. That they've been together for approximately 12 years, but now he's talking about marriage. And she feels the depth of love, obviously, with him as well. And these are the type of people that previously they didn't want to get married because they didn't want to conform to how marriage most often happens for people. But now, because their depth of love has opened up so tremendously, they are feeling from their hearts to take that next step together, but in their own way. And that was a really unexpected outcome for her. And also for me to hear about her since I've known her for a few years now. And I could not be happier for this couple because it's an incredibly beautiful that has been very specific to the combination of the Living Beyond Patriarchal Sex course and the Tigress month pass together at the same time. So I'm not telling you all of this to get you to sign up to something because the official course is not yet open for enrollment. In these days, in the first couple of days of January 2026, I'm only sharing this with you to reveal what it's really like for women in their self-inquiry of patriarchal sex behind the scenes. Because when it's applied to these very personal situations, and I've got to tell you, my mentoring does not spare them from seeing their own participation in the co-created paradigm of patriarchal sex. I tend to be very attuned in my insights, and I investigate what people are saying to me much, much deeper. And because I've seen all these patterns for so many years, it's very easy for me to track them and reflect things back that accelerate a woman's process. And when all the women get to hear each other's mentoring, it is a group level acceleration. And that together creates an world which is a very powerful magnetic influence on everyone that is in that space. And I do this because I want for women to be empowered by how they are able to change the patriarchal sex paradigm and how it's not actually totally out of their control to do so. There's actually a lot that women can do before bailing out of a relationship, because often it can seem like it's the man who's getting it all wrong. And so the woman's frustrated and she wants to leave. But when, we look around at what's happening all over the world and we see that collectively women have had enough. They've had enough of their own over-accommodating behaviors. They've had enough of enduring, of pretending to be okay in inequitable relationship intimacy. And of course, if it's truly abusive, then she should definitely go and end it. And both people have got to continue beyond those karmic cycles. But you know what? In my 25 years of working very deeply with people, and especially with women the longest, most of the time, what really could be happening is an evolution of our own as women. And this is what gives us the confidence to be able to apply that in real life situations as they arise. And there is so much return to the restored state for a woman in this. There's so much return to her natural coherency field beyond all of the battles and challenges that get aired in the online space. And because it's so valuable, I just kept talking about how impactful it was for them to hear each other's experiences along the way in that inquiry in the course. That group element of being able to get that personalized mentoring and to hear each other's mentoring, it's going to happen in the official course as well. It can't not, because the gravitational field of the patriarchal sex patterning paradigm is so intense that we actually need to create a different field with its own gravitational force for women to become attuned to that and keep becoming attuned to that over time. Because without that, you've got the reality of what you don't want. You've got all the confused polarity concepts out there, the same old patriarchal frames dressed up in different words. And all of that is going to keep pulling a woman back into the same unsatisfying relationship patterns, or just convince her that she's the problem and but she doesn't know the way out, or that he's the problem and she'd be better off without him, but possibly there's a way through for both of them together potentially. And so the very alive field that we create together in the Living Beyond Patriarchal Sex course, it's going to be part of the official one. And so some key transformational learning to become autonomous in the process is definitely part of the course as well. But it's just that the mentoring accelerates the learning so massively that your ability to have the personal clarity that you need to keep moving forward is going to become even more clear, creating more closeness with men when that's possible, instead of just more separation and more disappointment and more depletion and all of those things that we don't need more of in 2026 and beyond. For me, as someone who's worked deeply with both women and men in the conscious intimacy field, I really am coming from a dynamic place of wanting sovereignty for all of us. And people can obviously relate with whoever they want in their intimate life. It's just that my attention is on all of us getting this in the primary man-woman imprint as best we can, because everything else ripples out from that primary creation code. And that code affects everyone, no matter their sexual orientation or their gender. And just to finish up here for now, I want to say that living from what I call feminine source, or the restored female sovereignty state, her coherency field in the evolved way, this is the heart of what I actually specialize in. And when that is secure inside of a woman, everyone benefits from that, because everyone is born from a woman. So that's what I have today for you, everyone. And in the next episode, we'll be returning to the guest episodes, many of which I recorded with more wonderful speakers and authors and teachers who have been willing to enter this collective inquiry. And I've got to be honest, I'm not entirely sure how long all of these episodes will continue for, but I am seeing at least another year ahead for the Beyond Patriarchal Sex podcast. So I do hope that you will join me. I'm wishing you a very happy new year, a year of newness in your approaches to sex intimacy and relating in ways that are mutually beneficial, mutually pleasurable, mutually respectful, and more loving. Whenever I'm out socially and a friend asks, Dévashi, how can I get my partner into this exploration about living beyond patriarchal sex? My answer is exactly what I've put down in the show notes for you with this episode. And if you are willing to be the spell breaker of your bloodline and have the uninhibited pulse of Eros guiding you through life, beyond the matrix into the fullness of your divine sovereignty, then keep tuning in to these weekly episodes and share it with your friends. And may we all be free from suffering.